What are they trying to find out?
Well, I think what it comes down to is this. One, I think Judge Sotomayor has a fantastic personal story. I think it's a great story of not just professional accomplishments, but also being able to overcome lots of challenges in her personal life. So it's not just a great Hispanic story, it's a great American story. And I think we should all celebrate that. But at the same time, we are talking about a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. So the senators have a serious job ahead of them to provide advice and consent, strict scrutiny that is required by the Constitution for this type of an appointment. And they need to make sure that whoever gets appointed to this Associate Justice of the Supreme Court is someone that can impartially and fairly implement the laws of this country and review the Constitution as the document that it was intended to be, so that we can have the rule of law continue for everyone, not just a few, but all Americans. So it's going to be really important to make sure that as we go through this process, out of respect for the candidate, out of respect for the process, out of respect for the office, that we do go through this process so that it is held up for the American public to see that this is someone that can impartially implement the laws of this land.
I'm glad you brought up that phrase, advise and consent. It comes right out of Article 2 of the Constitution.
But why are we asking her for that separation when we haven't asked it of everybody, when they have exactly the same kind of,
Danny Vargas,
conflict?
I would say two things. One, I think to her credit, she's got an exceptional resume in terms of professional qualifications. I think her rulings, while she's been on the federal bench, have been fairly down the line and fairly mainstream, and I don't think they display any kind of prejudice one way or the other. And I think the concern is whether on the Supreme Court, where there is no higher court to be able to oversee that, whether that there's going to be a tendency to put the thumb on the scales of justice, right? And not just because of her rulings in the past, but because of some of her other speeches and comments and so forth. I think that's where the concern comes in. I think some of the comments that she made about policy coming from the appeals court level, I think comments related to that she's made in terms of the Wise Latina thing that everybody's been talking about and so forth. I think people want to get into that to make sure that when she does get on the bench, that she continues that professional record of impartiality, because she won't have a Supreme Court reviewing her anymore. She will be the Supreme Court. So I think that, to a certain extent, is what the concern is.
I have to stop it here for a break, but I want to come back to Wise Latina, and it's not an accident that we invited 3 Wise Latinas to be on the panel today. So
she's done it over and over and over again for 17 years.
Let me just add that I think the operative word that's causing controversy and causing consternation and so forth in that statement, which was not just a single isolated statement, she made the statement several times over the years, was the word better. I think that's what it comes down to. That's what's causing concern and issues. I think it's wonderful. I think it's appropriate to be able to say, because of my life experiences, because of the fact that I had to overcome adversity and economic challenges and this and that, it provides a value added to my experiences that I bring to the court and so forth. That's valid. That's appropriate.
So if she says value added, how come she can't say better?
Because better connotates a sense of superiority. Better connotates a notion that I will be able to come up with better decisions than some other white man that might be on the court. I think that sort of betrays the concept that we have of a justice being able to sit there blindly, the blind justice. I think that sort of belays that remark. I think if she had to go back and change the words, I think she would probably want to change the words around a little bit, because I don't think that she meant that she was better than anybody else. But I do think what she meant to say was that her experiences do add value to the deliberations process. I think that would be appropriate. But at the same time, I would say that, again, we're talking about a lifetime confirmation to the highest court of the land. So going through this process is appropriate. This is Washington, D.C. If I were going up to be the Supreme Court nominee and somebody gave me a pass and just threw me some marshmallow questions, being a New Yorican myself, I would be upset with that. I would say, give me the hard questions. Let me go through the process so that when I do make it through the process, I can be able to point to everybody and say, look, I made it through the process. And even though she may not have been the person that I would have nominated because of ideology, because I'm more on the conservative side, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we'll have a New Yorican on the court who's going to get confirmed, who knows what alcapurrias are, arroz con gandules, all those things are great, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that every justice on the Supreme Court can actually impartially interpret the laws.
That is the crux of it right there.
I've got to chime in because I'm really concerned about some of the tone of anyone who has any questions about a particular nominee's jurisprudence and their view of the role of the courts and so forth. If it's a person of color, if it's a female, if they question any of that stuff, they're immediately labeled with some kind of a negative connotation. Oh, you must be sexist, or you must be racist, and so forth. I think we've got to get away from that. I think because there are some really honest folks that are expressing some honest, sincere concerns. And I think those are valid. I mean, it's a valid thing because we're at a point right now where it's not just a Hispanic nominee to the court or a woman nominee to the court. We're talking about someone who's going to, again, occupy a seat of a 9-member panel that actually is the highest court of land that is involved in that constant tug of war that exists between the 3 branches of government. That's something that the founders of the Constitution put in place on purpose.
But Danny,
So-
I understand your point entirely, but also have to wonder whether when Justice Alito was being confirmed and during that confirmation process talked about growing up in New Jersey as an Italian American and seeing disparate treatment of Italians and talked about how that shaped his worldview and shaped his legal view, whether that got the kind of attention that Sonia Sotomayor's similar statements.
But let's be
gotten.
honest about it. I mean, Alito did not wear the Italian flag around him like many of us in the Hispanic community. We proudly, it's important to be able to know that it's great for Sonia Sotomayor to be able to take that Puerto Rican flag during the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York, but when she takes that off and puts the black robe on, that's a clear distinction. That point, when she puts the black robe on, it's going to be accepted and clear that she will be an impartial, fair interpreter of the law. Not just from a perspective of the complainants in a particular case, but also understanding the role of the court vis-a-vis the other 2 branches of government. Those are the 2 basic things that people who have some sincere concerns want to be able to get to. I agree that her record shows that she can be a fair, impartial jurist, and that's great. But it's always been in a situation where there's always been another court above her to be able to take a look at those decisions. She's now going to be in a situation where there will be nobody else above her reviewing that. So I think the folks that do have some sincere questions have the opportunity now during the hearings to ask those questions, but they do have to be fair, respectful questions. If they go at it, if they go after her because of the fact that she's a female, because of the fact that she's Hispanic and this and that, without it being tied to some real rational concerns, I think those senators in that party that does it as a Republican, they're going to be in trouble.
Well, Professor, isn't that really the intersection right there? But it is a big deal, isn't it?
It's a huge deal. It is a huge deal. And there are a lot of things to celebrate right now. I think you're right. I think there are a lot of aspects of her personal story that a lot of folks can relate with. And it's not just Puerto Ricans from New York. It's Hispanics. It's not just Hispanics. It's folks that come from an urban environment. It's women. It's people that have overcome social economic adversity and so forth. I think it's a great American story. All Americans should be able to celebrate this personal story of working hard and getting educated, doing the right thing, and achieving success. That's a great story that all of us can celebrate. Now, having said that, though, I think going through this process is the right and appropriate thing. If we all just applaud every time there's a nominee that's got a great personal story and just Omni Domini Spiritu Sancti, you're in, then that would be disrespectful to the process of the offices that we're hoping to put these people into. I think it's appropriate for her to go through this process, for her to be able to take some of these tough questions, because at the end of the process, she will be able to say that she went through the appropriate grilling that every other nominee ought to go through. Now, from a political standpoint, I would also say, as a Republican, I think it's something that Republicans have been able to point to in recent times, that we were able to point the first African-American Secretary of State, the first Hispanic Attorney General. These are all wonderful things that we can all, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, point to and celebrate. It's a wonderful thing at the same time that we're making sure that we've got the best and the brightest people in the most important positions of our federal government. Republicans need to walk a tightrope. They need to make sure that at the same time that they're being fair and respectful to the nominee, they're also making sure that they're taking seriously their role of advice and consent. They need to make sure that judicial temperament, in terms of the role of the courts, in terms of the fairness and faithful application of the law, is there. But at the same time, they don't need 3/5. They need a simple majority. 3/5 is to avoid a filibuster. Republicans will not filibuster.